I'd like to call this INR meeting to order, please. Can I have approval of the agenda?
Let me get my microphone on and get it positioned properly for this big audience. I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second. All in favor? We got citizens' comments. We got any, Steve? Nobody signed up. Nobody signed up. Okay. Move right along. Okay. All right. Approval of the minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second. Everybody in favor? And before I forget, Councilman Honeycutt is not here today. Just to be me and Terry today. So. We'll go right on into our discussion items. We've got a request from Lancaster County Council of Aging. Steve Willis.
Mr. Chairman, we have Hal and Catherine here. Well, Hal's here. So, we have a request from the Council on Aging to potentially acquire a parcel that's currently owned by the county. It's across the street from the Springdale Recreation Center. There's a grassy area used for overflow parking. Other than that, it's wooded. The grassy area is pretty much the only level area. Asked Hal, and it's got some real topo issues. There's a creek and all that back towards the railroad tracks. The Council on Aging would like to acquire the property. It has to be in their name. They can get grant funding to come in and put a paved parking lot there. And the theory would be they would have the parking, but we could use it on weekends, evenings for overflow parks and rec stuff. It's the same as we do now, but it would be paved instead of the grassy area. Certainly would want to have a reversionary clause in there. As indicated, we'll probably make it some kind of de minimis amount, $10. So we have to, keep the transfer legal, and that, just make sure that the grant money comes in. At the end of 24 months, if they haven't obtained the grant, it reverts back to us. We give them their $10 back. Hal, you want to come up and talk about, how y'all would be able to use the parking lot for, various events and everything?
Sure. Sally approached us a couple of months ago about this, and their problem is they have so many vans now that they use for transportation and meals and things like that. When they're parked in their parking lot up above us, they don't have room for their regular customers to come in and park. So they're needing somewhere to put their vans during the day. The only concern we had about it was that we need that for overflow parking on weekends, like if we run a tournament or something. During the week, it's not bad. It's on weekends mainly if we have a tournament. And it would actually improve the area. It would be paved. They're going to fence it. So it would be secured, and there'll be a drive on the back side of it that will go up the hill to the Council on Aging building where they can gate it. When we're using it, they can gate it off so people can't get in there. So, right now, what happens a lot is if we get a lot of rain or if we get a snowstorm, which is very rare snow, but if we get a lot of rain, kids come in there and do donuts, and we're constantly filling things in because it's just a grass parking lot right now. So,
How many parking lots? How many spaces, I mean?
it's 6, isn't it 6 acres? 6, you got the plat in front of you?
Look, it's a little over 6 acres.
But all of it's not usable. There's some wet areas back in there and some ditches and things. She hasn't even told us. They haven't even given us any plans yet, but they have a grant to do it with. So
They're going to use more than 1 acre. They're going to have to timber it.
yeah.
It'll be paved and not gravelled, is that
Paved,
correct?
yes, that's what she said.
So you said it's going to be gated. So you'll have access to it on weekends after hours.
Yeah, they'll move their vans and things to their top parking lot on weekends if we need it, and we'll alert them of that.
You got a tournament coming up,
Yeah.
they would move them. That'd work good.
Yeah, they just don't have room for anybody to park up there now when their vans are there.
And you don't have any plans to use this?
Not for any building or anything like that. Our plan was to use it for parking.
Okay.
And this is a good way to get it done without us having to pay for it.
Okay.
All right, get it.
I don't have an issue with it.
I don't know. You want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion, we move it forward to full council with a positive recommendation.
Second. All in
And-
favor?
Just so y'all know, when we come forward to council, I'll have to work with John because this would be a transfer of property, so it would involve an ordinance, public hearing, and all that, but, That could
And
be a
it
good
will, and if they don't use it or the grant doesn't come back, it reverts back to
Yes, sir.
county property?
we'll include a reversionary clause, and John can speak to that.
Correct, that's easy enough to do. You could define it very, very narrowly or a little permissively, but essentially if they quit operating their council on aging building there, it would revert to the county.
Good. So for anything they give it up for, it would automatically come out of the county. That'd be great. All right, let's moving on to sporting clays, UDO text amended rocks. Bring us up to date on that.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mosteller. I believe it is the November Inr Agenda where we discussed, where staff was asked to look into the outdoor shooting regulations, and which the county does permit within its agricultural zoning district as well as its industrial zoning districts. And the charge given to us was, is there an opportunity to perhaps segregate out the shotgun shooting sports from the other shooting sports, like, rifle and pistol bullseye type shooting, right? And the idea being that since shotguns have, just by, if you don't know anything about shotguns, the pellets do not travel as far as a rifled bullet would. And so perhaps maybe there could be other zoning districts they could be allowed in, different standards, et cetera, versus just kind of lumping everything all in together. And the way our ordinance is, and it's not atypical, a lot of ordinances are like this, it even has archery in the same category as a rifle range. So kind of, I do all of this sports, so it seems odd to me, but I've read a lot of ordinances, and that's just how many of them are written, so it's not too atypical. So having said that, we looked into it a little further, and when I say we, I mean our senior planner, Robert Teft, and so I certainly appreciate his due diligence. And we do think there's an opportunity, and I think it's probably a little of both. I think it's probably good to do a dive into the overall outdoor, I gotta take this. I think it's good to do a dive into the overall outdoor shooting range ordinance, just to kind of fine tune just some existing language in there. For example, we don't think we should allow outdoor shooting ranges in our industrial zoning districts. While yes, that's an area where you can have impacts like for noise and smell, we also believe that that land's too valuable to put like a shooting range out there when it could go in agricultural land, which we're in abundance of. So yeah, that's an easy, in our minds, a no-brainer kind of recommendations. Don't allow it in an industrial. And we do feel like you could treat shotguns and archery a little differently, whereby you would open it up and allow perhaps instead of just agricultural residential, possibly also allow it in the rural residential district. Again, that's still a rural characterized zoning district. You shouldn't see too many, air quotes, formal subdivisions, not saying they're not anywhere, but that would be possibly a permissible district, as well as our open space district, which really doesn't get used too terribly much. In terms of looking at standards, we're really going to defer. We're going to fall to the NRA on that. We don't feel like that's sort of like the industry standard. That is the industry standard for these type of facilities. So when recommendations on minimum separation distances and things like that, we're going to defer to that book because those are the experts. And I don't think staff or anyone on council wants to kind of put their toes in that water. Let's follow that and have someone certify that range meets the standard. And that again is typical practice. Now, one part we did sort of get a little bit kind of question marked on was, the case that kind of brought this up. We had a violation case and I'll try not to use the name at present unless someone twists my arm. But we had a banquet type facility that was offering some shooting clays type sports. I think it was actually 5 stand that they were offering. and it didn't, as I understand, it didn't go through a permitting process. They just erected the facility. And, how would we permit something like that? And so we do think that there's an opportunity so we're talking about agricultural residential and rural residential. These facilities could be allowed subject to meeting the various ordinances and standards and getting a special exception permit. And that's just, that's for all outdoor shooting ranges. We think that for sporting, for something that's shotgun oriented, the rural neighborhood district could potentially be another viable candidate for facilities that offer shotgun sports as an accessory use. So, for example, a banquet facility that hosts weddings and parties and whatnot, that if they want to offer this as an amenity to their guests, like, okay, it's the bachelor party and they're eating food in the banquet hall or whatever, and okay, at 3 o'clock let's all go out and bust some clays. We think that because it would be just on an intermittent basis, that we could possibly, through a special exception, allow it in the rural neighborhood district. Because again, it wouldn't be the frequency of day after day, bam, 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 and creating a nuisance. And you would still have the special exception review. So if there were neighboring property owners that wanted to have their voice heard, that they would have that opportunity to lobby their point of view, pro or con. The one part that we got kind of stuck on in that scenario is the case that we're looking at that may be in violation couldn't meet the separation requirements that are dictated by the NRA. And we've looked at their facility using just aerial maps, and we just don't see how it, as best as we can tell, we just don't see it's possible. And so, and this may be just something for further consideration, is do we, for these accessory uses, should the county be willing to consider a reduced distance? And maybe you consider it based on the recommendation by an industry professional, where they've evaluated a specific site, they've evaluated the NRA guidelines, and based on their expertise, and it'd be a convincing process, not a by right, but they could convince the zoning board of appeals, based on that evidence, that it would still be a safe facility. So that's a scenario. So
They would have to come to
Yeah.
the board of zoning.
it would go before the board. Yeah, nothing would be by right. And so that's kind of, and that's sort of and we weren't intending to come with the full ordinance here for your review, but that's kind of where how we're approaching this. And the last piece is we're bringing turkey shoots back. Somehow in the old ordinance, we had a turkey shoot process. New ordinance just got left out. So we're more or less resurrecting the old turkey shoot process and just improving it. So I'm open to any questions.
I would just like to say that this is not about the Ivy Place, and we don't do sporting goods. So I want to make that abundantly clear.
And I'll agree with that statement.
We don't do that. I got a couple of questions, Rox. One, is that use? They say they can't make the separation distance. They're in violation of that. Is that a Board of Zoning Appeals issue that they could appeal and get changed?
They could go through a variance process, so you are correct. I'll be frank though, and anyone that's having to gone through a variance process, it's tough.
I've been on that board.
Yeah, and so and that's what if you could get it would be. Again, the council will ultimately adopt what the council wants to adopt, but I would rather give the zoning board of appeals some specific criteria to consider, like expert credentials and consideration of, and I don't have all the factors, but give them some specific criteria versus saying go get a variance, because it by statute it's just such a tall bar that not many variances get appealed or get approved. So
I was just curious about that.
no, yeah.
And the other thing that is an issue is the noise.
Yes. So and that's where the separation comes from. And so most of the separation that we have in the ordinance and that you'll see replicated is basically a half-mile separation between the shooting area and a neighboring property is a half mile. And so that's why you see big distances. It's not as much as trying to keep the public safe from a projectile. It's more about noise, because a safe facility operator can develop a facility they call it do shot containment. and contain the shot, whether it's from a shotgun or a rifle, using tools and techniques to keep people safe. The distance helps, but it's not that the separation is more for noise and nuisance.
So where are we going from here?
So where we're going from here is we, at the November agenda, I think that the INR committee, which I believe actually initiated this, felt comfortable having staff develop more information on this topic. But before going to Planning Commission, the committee asked us to do one more check-in before the end of the year, if it was comfortable, to make sure they were comfortable. And if they were, then we would go ahead and proceed to Planning Commission with a complete text amendment. And this probably won't be on, if the INR is comfortable, I'll be frank, it'll probably be February, because our January agenda for Planning Commission is just overflowing right now.
So you'll develop a text amendment and it'll go straight to council and not come to this committee?
We will go through whatever process you would, since it originated with INR, we'll be happy to come back. I think at present, our understanding is that we would come to this committee in December, ideally get a recommendation to proceed on with the text amendment. We would craft the text amendment, go before Planning Commission, likely in February, and then go on to council in March. If you would like a check back in with the INR committee, I mean, that we have no problem with that. We do have like I said, this violation case, but we don't have it's not like we have a new business owner wanting to get started on a great new business and we need to get this done for them. So it can have one extra step if you're more comfortable with that.
Standard procedures, it's coming back to y'all anyway as council. So just, Planning Commission
fine.
makes the recommendation to y'all.
That's fine. The other question I have, so,
We can have some more discussion at the council.
yeah, we'll have some more discuss. I don't have a problem with going to full council. So what about the violation that's in, and what's the status?
Absolutely, and what we'll do is, I'll tell you, we'll just forward the INR committee the Planning Commission report, so you have it early, since it came from this committee, just to keep you in the loop, and if you have any immediate questions or concerns.
Yeah, but I'm asking about the status of the violation, right? And what are you going to do about that?
I think right now we're waiting to create, this is sort of similar to the home occupation case that we dealt with. If we saw merit in developing a pathway for the business to become legal, that's what we want to wait and have that
Okay,
become.
that's fine.
Thanks, Rob.
You're welcome.
All right, let's moving right along here. Discussion of the Wilson Creek Development Agreement, Rox.
Sure. And I'll kind of defer to, what I'll do, and I'll ask the county attorney to kind of supplement this a little bit, but I think what we'll do is, I think we want to introduce the item and just kind of talk about what is Wilson Creek and the development agreement. And I think there was a desire possibly to go into executive session to discuss potential contractual matters. And I think the county attorney can advise on that piece. John, does that sound good to you?
Yes, I believe that'd be the appropriate course of action.
Okay, great. Well, we're excited to be talking to you about the Wilson Creek project. I think most of council has some level of familiarity with it. It's already gone to Planning Commission, but just for the public and anyone else in the audience that might be curious, Wilson Creek is a proposed residential subdivision located in District 7 at the intersection of Henry Harris and Shelley Mullis. It's roughly 170 acres in size and consists of 168 tract that is proposed to be rezoned to medium density residential, and then a 2-acre tract that will be rezoned to institutional. And the ultimate goal is to develop a 312 lot single-family subdivision using the cluster subdivision provisions. And
So it is going to be cluster and it's not going to be MDR, is that correct?
It will be zone MDR, but the underlying intent is to utilize the cluster subdivision development ordinance. So it still gets rezoned MDR, but once you're zoned MDR, you can by right become a cluster if you meet the standards. And so the applicant has been very transparent coming forward, that this is how we're going to develop, and knowing that the county requires development agreements for cluster subdivisions, they'd like to go ahead and attach it. They'd like to go ahead and go through that process with the rezoning versus at a later time. And we agree that makes perfect sense to do it as one package versus, carving it up into different stages. And so we agree with their process.
Yeah, I was not aware that MDR had a built-in right for cluster development. Is that correct?
If you meet the minimum thresholds, which there's an acreage requirement and having the zoning, you can be a cluster subdivision.
That's my understanding, yes.
Yeah, I understand, but they're telling me it's by right.
Well, again, I think that, just to be clear, I think we've been, with the rezonings to MDR, and again, I've only been here for 18 months, maybe a little more. Most of the applicants that we've worked with have been very transparent. We're going, when they come through the rezoning process, we're going to develop a cluster subdivision. And they even, in not all cases, but I think in most cases, even have a concept plan to show you, to see, to illustrate how they'll conceptually meet our standards, and it's illustrative of being a cluster or not. And so some have, we've had Patterson Preserve, cluster, I believe that was a cluster subdivision, but others haven't, like Harris Mill, I think is developing just as a conventional MDR project.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be sure to figure that out before I vote for MDR.
Well, again, I think I think council recognized some months ago that there was a desirability with cluster subdivisions, and that, if it was going to entertain rezoning to MDR with the cluster subdivision, that it wanted to also have a development agreement accompanying it. And I think that one of the reasons why the council felt that was really important was that, one, it would push the applicant to have to develop a concept plan. While we ask for them and they're always encouraged, they're not required to develop a concept plan when rezoning. And two, it requires them to prepare a traffic impact study. So again, at the rezoning stage and/or development agreement stage, you're going to know generally what the community is going to look like, and you're going to know generally what the traffic impacts will be and what the proposed mitigation is going to be. And so those were sort of, and then the third piece is that if it is deemed that any mitigation is needed for community impacts, there would be an opportunity for the council and/or its associated review committee to ask for potential mitigation in association with the project. And so those were deemed as, yes, you're asking for something, MDR, you're asking to do smaller lots. If that's the case, we want to raise the bar on you in terms of what we want in consideration of that. And so that's, if it were to just rezone to MDR, no binding concept plan, whatever they show you is what they show you. They're not bound to it. Two, no traffic study, right? I mean, they'll do one with a preliminary plat, but the council will never see it. And then three, there'd be no opportunity to have an open dialogue about community impacts and any kind of necessary mitigation. So it's a push-pull, and so I think that council kind of struck a good balance when it was evaluating development agreements and the types of projects it wanted to absolutely have one in versus the ones that it would just consider as an option.
Well, I've been on council now 4 years, and this is the first time I have understood MDR to have cluster development as a right.
Okay. So if the kind of providing a kind of a broad outline, what I'd like to do is talk to you a little bit about some of the specific aspects of the project, and I'd like to also introduce a development team as well, and I'm sure they'd like to say a few words. I think at the advice of our county attorney, he wanted some of the aspects of the conversation. It would be appropriate to be an executive session, and so I'm going to ask that John, for a few minutes, kind of takes it over and guides us into that environment.
Correct. And Rox, to be clear, your introduction of the project generally, and having development team come up and provide information for the committee, I think is, again, warranted as part of the process. As far as discussing any particular open items within the development agreement, such as possible mitigations and the public benefits that can be negotiated and bargained for by the county in the context of the development agreement. Those matters are those that are proper for executive session for a contractual matter. So again, I think general overview, and then the committee would want to entertain a motion to go into executive session. Again, to my point, Section 63110 of State Code, Rox has alluded to this, allows the county to negotiate public benefits derived from the development in a return for vesting of those development rights for the period of time included in the agreement. That can include affordable housing, that's not really a component here, but design standards and on and off-site infrastructure improvements. Additionally, the development agreement ordinance allows for certain conditions, terms, and restrictions or other requirements that are determined to be necessary by the local government for public health and safety to be incorporated into the agreement. That's where you often see rooftop fees. Traditionally, as Lancaster has dealt with rooftop fees, it's been meant to offset the impact on fire, EMS, law enforcement. Additionally, in the past, just historically, some of the development agreements have included payments to the school system for anticipated impact of children entering the school system. But those are generally the type of public benefits and terms and restrictions that are negotiated with the developer, between county and developer.
You want to go ahead and bring them up?
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead and.
We'd like to, could we, Katie, could you close the door, please? Since we're going to go into executive session.
Yeah,
You want to get overview from them first, or go into executive session?
We can either go into executive session in chambers or here, since there's no one else.
Stand by the door at the back.
Yeah.
Well, the recording, correct.
We have the recording.
So executive session would need to be in the
back.
chambers.
Sorry, for live stream.
Sorry, and I'm not talking into the mic. Again, I think, Rox, whether you want to hit highlights of the project here or in executive session, I think is wholly up to.
Can't we just hear what they got to say?
Sure. I think
Correct.
We might not ask any questions, we might just listen.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, so sure, I'd like to go ahead and start by introducing the project team, and Ken Holbrooks was one walking towards the podium with Bear Development. We also have Tim Covey with Bear Development in the burgundy shirt, and then Tom Waters with Provident Development, raising his hand there. They are the project team that the planning department and engineering and others have been working with over the past, I'm not sure how, six plus months, to work together to put together the plan that is shown before you, as well as some other items, and working them through the rezoning process. And so been a great group to work with, and I'm happy to introduce them here this evening.
Thank you. You stole a little bit of my thunder talking about where we've been. Thank you, guys. I guess I'm somewhat speaking to two of you, and I'll make it somewhat brief. This is a little bit different from a zoning discussion and a little bit new for all of us, I guess. And you'll get to hear us again in a few weeks. We've appreciated the time that we spent with both the property owners. This is a legacy property. It's been around in the family for 200 years. They were gracious enough to let us be the stewards of the property. And so we've come in and we've met with, like we normally do. We've been down here for decades as a team. Working in Lancaster County, we like to listen and try to react to that. And Rox and his staff have been fantastic in helping us and kind of guiding us through that process. We have tried to listen. That has been both because of COVID and because we're trying to get through the process correctly. It's been the better part of since March. The plan that we're not, I guess, really talking about or presenting right now, but he mentioned is one that's been looked at from a technical and a lot of other constraints, and thought put into it. We also felt, and there was a little procedural dialogue that I want to make sure I address as well. we, as a group, always want to come in and present the whole thing. You have an opportunity that's a little different from other jurisdictions where we could have come in and just done a zoning and then come back and done some other things later. We didn't feel like that was comfortable. We wanted to see exactly what we're going to be presenting, and that meant that we wanted to be the zoning and the site plan and the development agreement together so we all knew we were doing the same thing. We think that's the great contract that we would have with you, and the reason we continue to come back and the reason you continue to want us to come back is so that we strike a good arrangement together. So the plan you see and the dialogue we'll have, I guess, in executive session would reflect that as well. We are trying to be good stewards and continue to be that way. So I don't want to really necessarily go into any of those details. I guess we'll do that in a minute. I don't know that there's more that you want to talk about on the plan per se. We have done a neighborhood meeting that we did outside the bounds of the process because we feel like it's very important to us to hear what the neighbors say and to mitigate some of the concerns that may come to you. We had a very well-attended meeting. There was lots of good dialogue. We had a planning commissioner there. We had staff there, and of that, we ended up with no one show up for planning commission, and only a couple of calls, I think, inquired out of complaint or anything else, and so we were able to get through planning commission with a very favorable vote as well. So once again, this is the next step in the process, and we look forward to talking to you a little bit more and hearing your things. But if there's comments before we go or to the next step, let me know, and I'll certainly answer them, or my team can answer them as well.
Anything? Yeah, executive session. That's about it.
Thank you.
You want to make a
I'll
motion?
make a
for executive
I'll
session?
make a motion, we go into executive session to discuss a contractual matter.
Second. All right, let's go in there and see what's going on.
Is it okay for the development team to come with us to discuss? Is it okay for the development team to come with us?
Yeah.
Okay, great, yeah. Hey, come on back, yeah, they may ask us for
Oh, that's Terry's. Hey, how's everything? Terry left his case under there. I was like, what the hell?
No, I think they, when they draw that, they, I thought what good is it, Rock said, is it okay for the development team to come in? He said, yeah. But otherwise, they're, especially for
call this meeting. I'd like, need a motion to come out of executive session.
Motion to come out, my mic on again. Motion to come out of executive session.
Second. All in favor? All right, John?
An executive session, a contractual matter was discussed. No decisions were made, no votes taken.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to continue the discussion on the meeting, the Wilson Creek contractual matter with the recommendation that staff bring back more information, and this will be at a call meeting in January. That's a little messy language. Maybe we can do better.
I think the intent there is there, just so the record's clear. The motion's to continue a consideration of that, the agenda item for the Wilson Creek DA at a special called meeting in January with more information from staff provided at that time.
I got a motion for adjournment.
Did we vote on it?
We need to, yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. You got a motion, I second it. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, I can get a motion for.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Second, we are adjourned.
Adjourned. 3 hours, 2 hours, huh? Not too bad. Say it fast, Terry.